from Uganda, a country that has not yet been at our webinars before. I'm very pleased to have Benard Mbaine. I hope I pronounce your name well. And you are heading the Wind Power Association of Uganda, a country which is in Eastern Africa. And Benard, I have the pleasure now to hand over to you.
Yes, Stefan, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I want to be sure that you're hearing me very clearly.
Yes.
Okay, great. My name, as said, is Benard Mbaine from Uganda, and I'm the chairman of the Wind Power Association of Uganda. Unlike most of the markets that you are used to, the Ugandan wind energy market is a very new market, and it's just emerging. So, but I will share some few slides of mainly the status and what are the few developments that are taking place, and what could be the opportunities for the different players and developers that would like to come down to our market. So if you will allow me share my screen. So I will look at the status of wind energy in general, but also focusing directly to wind energy. As I said, I'm the chairman of the Wind Power Association, but I also double as the vice chairman of the Uganda National Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Alliance in REA. I will briefly introduce what Wind Power Association is. So we are a non-profit making civil society organization founded in 2017 as a national platform, for the different stakeholders, but mainly to, promote and support the sustainable development of the wind power technology in Uganda. So we are also an active member of the Uganda National Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Alliance, which is the national organization, that takes the different associations in the sector. So our action areas, our key action areas, are capacity building, creating awareness of wind technology in the country. We do coordination and representation of the different players in the sector, that is representing them at the national level, East African level, and the sort. So we also engage in policy and advocacy together with the government, to try and advise them on the new and upcoming policies, the desires of the different players in the sector. But finally, we also, look at environmental protection as a key aspect of renewable energy, and looking at the global trend of climate change. So looking at the whole, renewable energy at large, before we drill down to the wind, our country has very small capacity, because our total installed capacity is just over 1.2 gigawatts, of course, which is very small, and 80% of this is from hydro power. But what we've seen is that in the past about 10 years, we've had several, PV system connections. These are mainly, rooftop connections, but we've also had about 50 megawatt of grid-connected solar plants. These were the first ones. We have 3 10 megawatt plants, and then 1 20 megawatt plant, which is, I think, one of the biggest in, the East African region. So we also note that biomass remains as one of the largely used energy source, especially in the rural areas. Of course, all these offer an opportunity for the expansion of the electricity to these rural areas. If you look at the graph on the right side, it shows the generation mix of electricity, where 80% is from the hydro, 8% thermal, then 4% from solar, and 7% cogeneration. So usually, personally, when I'm presenting this graph, I don't feel very happy, because we do not have any percentages from the wind energy. So that's the big question. But before we also go down to wind energy, maybe look a little bit at the regulatory structure of the Uganda's energy sector. So currently, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development is the custodian of the whole energy sector. We also have the Electricity Regulatory Authority, which is the regulator of the whole energy sector, regulating generation, transmission and distribution, sale, export, and import of energy. So then we have others like the Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited, which is responsible for generation. But we note that generation is also open to private sector companies. Then we have the Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited that does the transmission of electricity. And then the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited that is responsible for distribution. We also note that distribution is also open to private sector players. We have some private utility companies that have different territories that they are controlling. And then maybe also the other government bodies like the Rural Electrification Agency, which is mandated with the authority to do rural electrification, extend the electricity to the rural areas. The National Environment Authority, of course, that also comes in when it comes to licensing and giving permissions for these power generation projects. So I would like to look at the opportunity available. Firstly, in general, we'll note that Uganda has high potential for renewable energy. Over 2 gigawatts of large hydros. You have as potential for geothermal. You have high potential for biomass, and you have very high potential of about 6 kilowatt hours per meter squared per day of solar energy. But also in the recent past, now following the recent studies, you have about 6 to 7.5 meters per second, especially in the northeastern region of the country. As you see on the map, this is one of the maps that was published by the ministry. Not very accurate, but of course it indicates, you see the northeastern side in the far, top right. The pink color shows the highest potential region, the wind potential, where you can find it in Uganda. So we also look at the high target. We have about 17 gigawatts of target in the year 2028. But out of these 17 gigawatt targets that was set, we have generated less than 1.5 gigawatts. So there is still very big room for expansion, especially for the energy developers. It shows a very big opportunity in about $51 billion investments that are still, available. Of course, when you look at the opportunities, you also look at the high population growth that we have in the country. We estimate about 53 million of people by year 2028. And, according to the national plan, if we will have attained a middle status income by that time, by 2028, it means that the need for electricity would quite be very high, about 20 gigawatts of electricity that will be required if the current population growth is maintained. Then the other big opportunity that you look at is that in Uganda currently only about 28% of the population has access to electricity. So the access to electricity is only about 28. So this means that you have over 70% of the population with no access to electricity. And when it comes to the rural areas, this percentage goes very high to about 90%. So this shows how much the wind energy and the other sources can come in, especially those that can be distributed sources of electricity, where you can extend to the villages. Of course, we know that there are challenges of grid extension, but looking at the distributed power sources, the mini grids that can be put up, it shows a very big opportunity for the different developers. So we'll look at wind energy a little bit more in specific. As I said before, wind energy is one of the least developed technologies in the country, with no grid projects currently, but of course there are those that are being proposed. And looking at what could be the challenges for this, because it's important to know what could be the issues that bring this about. So one of the things that we note is that there are relatively lower wind speeds as compared to maybe the other countries like Kenya. For example, in the map on the right, you will see some of the wind areas of the country in the northeastern part. As I had said, if you'd compare it with the other far right side, which is the Turkana side of Kenya, where you see, the very dark colors, which indicate very high potential, you'll see that our speeds are a bit relatively low compared to maybe Kenya. So what this means is that in one way or the other, to make the projects very attractive, you may need either government intervention or some subsidies to be put in place to promote and make some of these projects very feasible.
Benard, just
yes.
a short remark, because I think there is somehow I can see there's a box on part of your presentation. I don't know where this comes from.
Which one is this?
Usually doesn't disturb. Yeah, now it's gone.
Sorry about that. So I think it was okay. You can see it clearly now.
Yeah, there is a small box now just left, but I think you can see the map is now completely there. Thank you.
Okay. So this map, the further left, where you have the darkish color, is the Kenyan side, the Turkana, the famous Turkana region, which has one of the highest wind speeds, of course, in the African countries. But also you look at the circled area, which shows the wind areas of Uganda. The speeds are relatively low, but you have speeds of about between 6 to about 7.5 meters per second, which is of course good speed. But to increase on the attractiveness of these projects, on the viability of these projects, is you may need the government support to come in, and when it comes to maybe logistics, because logistics and then grid extension to evacuate the power, so that the project can become more attractive for the developers. So one other thing that we note is that the low awareness of the wind technology, as we said, unlike in the developed countries, wind energy is a new technology in Uganda. So you will find that there's a need to create more awareness for both the local people when it comes to acceptance of projects, for people to understand the projects better. So then they can be able to recognize and accept the projects. The other point is the mindset. So mindset is more of even in the government officials, even in the local people, that people used to think that Uganda doesn't have very high speeds, doesn't have good potential. So then this makes it less prioritized by the people. So everyone thinks very fast about solar, everyone thinks about hydro, but you find very few people are giving attention to the wind technology. Of course, the other point is prioritization by the government, which a bit relates to mindset. But currently, since when we started, the associations, interventions, and the different projects that are around, we've now started to pull efforts of the government to try and focus more on the wind technology and trying to show them that there's enough potential. Of course, some of you may know about the recent studies by IFC, which show very high potentials in Uganda also. Then one last point, which is also one key point that of course is common to other different countries, is grid integration challenges. Of course, looking at the nature of Uganda's grid, with only about 1.2 megawatts of installed gigawatts of installed capacity, it limits on how much wind energy you can integrate into the grid. So that is also one of the challenges. But of course, going forward, we see more and more large hydro projects that come onto the grid, which means that you increase the spinning reserve, so then you're able to integrate more wind energy onto the national grid. For example, we have an upcoming 600 megawatt project. So you know that when you have a 1.2 gigawatt grid and you add on a 0.6 gigawatt project, which is large hydro, so then you have a bigger gap to integrate more wind energy onto the system. So let's have a look at some of the few interventions that have been done in the recent past, because we note that in the recent 5 years, we've had a little more of interventions on wind energies. So number one is you looked at the government under the Ministry of Energy tried to pilot a wind study in one of the regions, the highest potential region, with some 2 wind measuring masts, which were, of course, the first ones in the country. And some of the indicative results from those masts, which were installed about 4 years ago, indicate speed of about 6 meters per second. But of course, due to lack of internal capacity on the side of the government, we were not able to get a conclusive report of the data from these masts that were installed. So I think the government is also working on improving their capacity because, as a new technology, it comes with a need to build the capacity of the local institutions, both the private and the government. So there's a need to improve on their capacity, and I believe the government is currently working on that. Another point that you'll have is that the government also piloted some microgrids in 2016, of course, very small scale turbines. So the aim was to try and see if wind energy can work out, if there is really potential. And these microgrids were put in some of the schools and communities, and they were benefiting schools and communities. And they were working, they are still working really very well. So that was one sign that the government is, is trying to prioritize wind, is trying to put efforts in developing the wind energy industry. So another one big project that we have seen is that in 2015, we got one developer, a Sri Lankan company, which expressed interest to develop a 20 megawatt project. So they started by installing 8 wind measuring masts to measure the wind in the high potential region, which is the northeastern region of the country. You'll see some of the pictures showing the wind measuring masts. And this was a very successful measurement campaign, and currently they have been permitted to do a pilot 20 megawatt wind farm. So this will be our first utility scale wind project, 20 megawatt in the northeastern region of the country. And they are currently doing the designing, and I think soon they will be starting the construction of the project, because they have all the green light already from the government side. They have all the necessary permissions for the project to move on. So we also got some wind resource map and a pilot project, which this program was funded by African Development Bank through the Ministry of Energy, and they had advertised a tender for wind resource mapping and establishment of a pilot wind farm. This project, I think, still had procurement challenges. They have not progressed to the next stage, but this also shows how much the government is focusing to improve and promote the wind technology in Uganda. Of course, looking at the policies that have been put in place, the current energy policy, which is under development by the Ministry of Energy, favors the development of wind energy. They have put priorities to try and develop the wind technology. Of course, one other aspect you look at is the government has piloted very many windmills in the past years in, of course, the high potential region, because you see that this high potential region is also one of the water stressed regions. So they used the wind water pumping system deployed in different areas to try and supply people with water for domestic use. So all these interventions to try and utilize the available potential of wind in different ways show how much the government is committed to developing the wind industry. Of course, to our side, like the Wind Association, it shows, every small intervention that comes in shows us, the potential available, and shows the people how much we can enhance from our available potential in the country to try and, overcome the issue of mindset, the issue of awareness. Of course, as we also attract the large investments, the utility scale projects. So in the pictures, of course, you will see some of the small wind turbines that have been put in some of the different regions to do, of course, different activities, wind energy generation at household levels and domestic levels like that. So that is a bit of how the Ugandan industry has progressed when it comes to wind energy, and we are welcome to developers who would like to work with us and develop the country's wind energy resource that is available. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Benard. That was an excellent presentation. And in particular, I appreciate that you showed us the full range of wind technology. Many people tend to only think about large grid-connected wind turbines. Of course, we also have a small wind section, but we also talk about wind pumps. So the full range, which can benefit the people, need to be considered. I do appreciate that. And just as a question, I know that you do not have large wind farm yet in place, but there is obviously soon something will happen. Is the current corona pandemic having any impact on that?
The current corona, of course, usually when you do not have a lot of projects in the pipelines, you do not expect a lot of direct impact. But of course, indirectly, yes, because, for example, there are some projects that we're working on, for example, on financial closure, financial close within this area. So that means that there is a little bit of realignment by, for example, the international banks to where they want to put their funds. So that means you have some delay in closing some deals for such projects. Then also the live scenario is that recently, as approaching the government, we were trying to work on a capacity building with the government before the lockdown. But when the lockdown and the whole corona situation came, when I approached them again, they said, no, let's put capacity building on hold, because currently the country is looking at activities that can quickly revive the economy very fast. So that means some of those activities which may not be a very priority at that time are realigned and put on hold. So that is a bit of the impact that I can look at, mainly on the finance side, the finance that could come from the different partners. So yeah, that's where you have a lot of effect. But on groundwork and physical activities, because we do not have quite a lot, then you do not have a lot of impact. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Also, thank you for sharing this information with us. And I look forward to working with you. And I think you're one of the pioneers in the region, obviously. It's great to see then how Uganda can become the new wind power hub in Eastern Africa. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.